Welcome to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast, presented by the Fantasy Football World Championship, home to the industry's most accurate rankings.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast. I am your host, as usual, Adam Krautwurst, and with me is Mr. Full-Time himself, Jody Smith, and Shawn Childs, Shawn_Childs on Twitter. The power behind a lot of these rankings here, and this is another preview show of the AFC North. How is everybody doing tonight, Jody? How are you feeling?
Fantastic. It's been it's nice to get in here in the AC, because I don't know if you know what's going on in Texas. It's been pretty miserable. It's been over 100 for I don't know how many days in a row, and I feel like I can't even step outside. So this is a good excuse for me to sit here in the fantasy dungeon and talk about some things that really interest me.
The fantasy dungeon. Shawn, how you doing tonight?
Well, we rarely see the sun in June in Cape Cod. It's rained a lot and affected the golf weather a little bit, but hopefully July's a little bit better. But pounding through these outlooks, 3 teams left, probably, well, maybe less than 3, and I should be done Saturday at the latest. Hopefully I get it done Friday, and then
right into that finish line.
That's right. That's right.
Then you got to figure out who you like.
That's right.
I had the pleasure of writing the projections for 105 defensive linemen yesterday. So that time, 105.
It's a deep dive. Wow. That is a deep dive. Well, here in Rochester, we can't see the sky because apparently there's fires going in thousands of miles north of us in Canada, and the smoke is drifting down here. The air isn't that great. Apparently, the kids can't go outside and play soccer, so it's always something. It's always something up here. But yeah, we will get into it tonight. I'm excited. This is a great division, the AFC North. And we'll start with the Baltimore Ravens here. So, Shawn, we got you. You have Lamar Jackson throwing for a career high 3,990 yards as the quarterback of the Ravens. What are you seeing for him this year, other than that?
I really like their tight ends. You know, all 3 of them. You know, Isaiah Lively likely came on last year, and Charlie Kohler is somebody I kind of liked before last season, but then he got hurt and he really didn't get a chance. So between the 3 of them and Andrews, I think they could really be productive. Last year their tight ends caught like 42% of the completions by their quarterbacks, and that was with Lamar out for 5 games or so. But I think there's going to be a lot of balls going to tight end. But 2 years ago, Jackson was on pace to pass. He played 12 games. He was on pace to pass for 4,082 yards. I think that the receiving core is tremendous compared to last year. I mean, last year the wide receivers for the Ravens had 124 catches, 1,507 yards, 203 targets, 7 touchdowns. I think there's 2 receivers that beat that by themselves.
Yeah.
In the NFL last year. So just the upgrade 2 years ago, 216, 2,400. 338 targets, 10 touchdowns. Zay Flowers added to the mix, Odell Beckham. Definitely an increase in, Rashad Bateman needs to, play a full season so he can probably live up to the potential. People drafted him last year.
Yeah, no, I completely agree there. What do you think, Jody, about Lamar? I mean, we love him for his rushing upside, right? Does him throwing more, does that hurt his fantasy outlook?
No, it couldn't possibly do anything but help. I'm really interested to see how he looks with Todd Monken running the offense over there. They're already saying that they're planning on airing it out, and like Shawn said, he was off to a great start last year before, of course, it got derailed as it usually does. I mean, me personally, I feel like I'm pretty firm that Lamar is going to come in as my QB6. I mean, obviously, you can argue him anywhere. I think up to and including QB3 if you're really excited about him. But for me, he's firmly behind Mahomes, Allen, Hurts. And, I'm real big on Justin Herbert this year. And I still think Joe Burrow is probably a safer play than Lamar Jackson. I mean, that said, he was QB7 in points per game last season. there's nothing wrong, absolutely, with Lamar Jackson. My projections don't come out as generous as Shawn's, but I still, like I said, I still think he's a great, QB1 target, and I'm excited to see where how they look in this preseason.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun to watch that. I've got him as my personal QB4. I love Lamar. I love the weapons that they've added. But before we go any further, too, I want to tell everyone in the chat, hey, put me in, coach, into the chat and have a chance to win a free $50 Superflex Bowl team tonight, drafting tonight. So that's put me in, coach, in the chat. Follow us, like us, subscribe to us here on the channel, and we'll be doing a lot of this, more and more of this stuff. The giveaways, man. Full-time Fantasy, Scott Atkins and the guys are so good at doing these giveaways too. And here, even this podcast tonight, we're giving away, premium subscription type material here. Shawn's projections and team breakdowns. That's premium subscription stuff behind the paywall. And here we are, just giving it out for free here on the podcast because we love you guys. So running backs. I'm going to let you go first, Jody, with the running backs here from the Ravens, because I know we've talked about Dobbins, but before we talked about it in the preseason rankings. So I'll let you take the lead here on J.K. Dobbins. What do you think?
Yeah, he's a guy I've been really excited about all preseason. Adam, you and I have talked about it. I felt like, with the way he ended last year, he was a guy I really was wanting to target this year. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, around the industry, it seems like everyone else is kind of caught up. I mean, generally, you can get him as around the RB 18 range. And to me, that's just screaming value. You look at last year, right up until Baltimore's week 9 bye, they kind of used him sparingly. Like they were still worried about how, his knee was recovering and all that. But after that, they just went ahead and it took off the locks. And he averaged 92 rushing yards in his final 5 games, scored 7 TDs in the final 6 games. To me, I'm really excited about the potential involvement as a receiver out of the backfield. I know they haven't asked their backs to do much with that, but Dobbins was a pretty good receiver in college. I think he's perfectly capable of being a 25, 35, maybe even higher catch guy. And I feel like as long as he stays healthy, we're keeping in mind the Ravens, they didn't spend any draft capital on a running back. They didn't add anyone via free agency. I feel like this is safely his backfield, and he's a guy I've rostered so much, and I feel like all things break his way and he stays healthy. I think he can approach RB1 numbers. And like I said, with an ADP around RB 18, it's screaming value.
Yeah, I'm looking for his ADP right now on the full-time fantasy championship. That's the mid-stakes event here over at the FFWC. RB 18. Yeah, middle of the 5th round. So I think it's pretty good. He's only one of 2 running backs going in that 5th round, him and Aaron Jones. Shawn, what do you think? Do you think he's got I know you have him in there for the projections. Do you think he has RB1 upside?
He came out, I mean, in the first projections is the 20th running back. And like you said, he's going in, around, I think he's going around 19 in some other format, but I mean, in that range, so it's just a matter of, Lamar steals some touchdowns. Can he get enough catches? And the catches, if he gets more catches, that can help his yards. But he was pretty impressive, late last year. Really didn't look good early in the year. He looked like he was definitely hurt, and then I was surprised that he kind of came on late after having that little break. They missed some games. So he's a good player, and that team should be a lot better offensively, which leads to more touchdowns. And there's something to be said for a running back on a high scoring team. And hopefully the Ravens and Lamar Jackson can get back to where they were a couple of years ago. Jackson throwing 35 touchdowns and being productive in the run game.
Yeah, I said this about J.K. Dobbins going into last season. I feel like he is a running back, a player that is burning a hole in the Ravens' pocket. Like he's been in the team for this is year 4, and he hasn't he missed an entire year. His rookie year, we'd be splitting carries. Last year, he got kind of a late start. So I really think they want to let him go here, and so I completely agree with you guys. Is there anybody else here, Shawn? Gus Edwards, Keaton Mitchell. I see you even have Lamar Jackson probably as one of their better rushers anyways here on this team. Actually second on the team in carries. You project Lamar Jackson with 156. Is there anybody else here worth really targeting other than just a straight handcuff?
Yeah, I mean, Edwards will have some games where he'll rush the ball, they'll be ahead, get some late touchdowns. He might get some goal line carries. He's definitely going to rotate him in, and he plays pretty well for a big back, and but he's just kind of
doesn't get enough catches. So in PPR leagues, he kind of has a, kind of a boring floor, I guess, unless obviously if Dobbins had an injury. Mitchell, I kind of rated him as the third guy with some catches, but still really, really low unless there's an injury. So, yeah, just, Lamar stay healthy. And I really think Lamar last year, he might have came back if he wasn't waiting to get paid. And that was a big factor. So, and I know everybody says he's missed 10 games the last 2 years, but, pay the guy last year and he might have played the playoffs for you.
Right. Right, exactly. So, and yeah, it's a reference to the chat. Yes, Scott, I think he did have a cleanup surgery, just like a procedural thing. I think he had some stuff in there he'd have to taken out, but I think he's going to be good to go. All arrows point up for him. Speaking of pointing up, the Ravens receiving core, finally, I feel like they got the weapons that kind of Lamar's been asking for, the kind that he deserves. They add Odell Beckham in the off season. Rashad Bateman coming off that season-ending foot injury. I think he's going to be back to full strength, hopefully, and obviously Zay Flowers in the first round of the NFL draft. Was this kind of a tough group here, Shawn, to kind of project, because they got a new offensive coordinator and they've got some new passing weapons here now? How did you kind of go about projecting these guys?
Yeah, I think the main thing with them is, I showed that, 2 years ago that it was 216 completions to the wide receivers. But, Andrews had a great year, but, I kind of view the tight ends better than, the receivers a little bit, at least Likely and Andrews and Kohler, so I think Flowers is kind of a, sneaky, get him the ball and can make some big plays. And Beckham has, a pretty good resume, but, he hasn't done much and he's been coming off an injury. So, last year, the receivers caught 41% of their completions. I've moved it up to 46. For realistically for these players to get 20 or 30 more wide receiver targets, Lamar's going to have to throw the ball 2 or 3 times more a game than I haven't projected for. And you already probably think that I haven't projected for too many yards based on his resume. So how do you squeeze? I mean, I only have 50 catches going to the running backs, 132 to the tight end position, and Andrews catching 88 of them, and the backup tight ends between Likely and Kohler 43, and that seems reasonable based on what Likely did last year. So where do who gets the majority of the catches at wide receiver? So maybe I'm in a wait and see mode and see what happens for their receivers this summer. Healthy, Bateman, a little nicked up, but they definitely could progress higher. And if the ball shift, maybe 30 completions shift from tight end to wide receiver, they'll have a little more value. But Bateman's the only one I think that's viable as potential starter in the fantasy world, and anyways out of the gate. And I do favor the tight ends over there.
Yeah, no, I mean, they have consensus tight end too, Mark Andrews. I love Bateman, wide receiver 49, guys, over at Full-Time Fantasy mid-stakes events. He's kind of been like that across the industry. I've loved Bateman since college, so I'm a little kind of biased to it. Again, another player that burning a hole in their pocket, a guy that they drafted to be a playmaker. Last year, he was sensational and then just had the injury. Jody, how do you view this receiving core?
About the same. It's tough to handicap right now. That Mark Andrews is going to be involved. It would make sense that Isaiah Likely would also have plenty of targets. It might make sense for them to run a bunch of 12 sets, but we don't really know at this point. I'm kind of curious. It's kind of hard right now. I think what Shawn, it's hard to get 2 wide receivers with, say, north of 20% target share in this offense, which is kind of what I have. I actually have Odell Beckham leading the way in targets, but honestly, I would prefer to take Rashad Bateman. When you look at their ADP at FFWC, Bateman's at 102 and Beckham's at 105, so they're pretty much going back to back. I mean, given a choice at that point in the draft, I'd rather go ahead and take Bateman. There are obviously injury concerns with him, but it's been a long time since Beckham has been a really reliable fantasy options. Dating back to 2016, he's only played 54% of games. It's been since 2018 since he's averaged anywhere north of 12.7 points per game. His best season and he actually stayed healthy in 2019. Now, granted, it was with the Browns, but wide receiver 25 that year. And I feel like, I don't even know that he in this particular scenario with him being a year older and not even playing last year, I don't know that his ceiling is even there. So, I'm interested. I guess you could take either one of them at that point in the draft. You're into the triple digits, but overall, I would prefer Bateman. But this is one of the offenses that we'll be watching the most this summer to kind of see, how it plays out.
Yeah, no, we completely agree. I think the guy here in the passing game that we're all kind of looking to be the number one guy, I think from the projections too, is Mark Andrews, consensus tight end 2. ADP in the mid third round for this non-tight end premium draft here, full-time fantasy championship. Do you see him kind of having the same type of year this year, Shawn, as he did last year? Kind of just a tight end 2 guy here, someone that you can take behind Travis Kelce if you miss out on him.
Yeah, he scores and makes big plays, and he's not even really on the field like as much as Kelsey's on the field a lot. I mean, they do rotate 2 tight ends, and his snaps have definitely increased over the last couple of years. But he was banged up a little bit, but he's definitely a talented player.
For sure. Jody, thoughts on Andrews, or just kind of the same old steady Eddie?
Yeah, I mean, he's not someone. I'm generally a guy that waits on tight end. I mean, I guess you can certainly argue for Travis Kelce as being a guy to target in late in the first round. I don't generally like taking Andrews, although my raw numbers dictate, at a 26% target share, I have him at 77 catches, 1,049 yards, and 8 touchdowns. I mean, that kind of production it's very rare to find at tight end. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. In particular, if you can stack Andrews with Lamar Jackson, that's a really positive way to go. I just prefer not to do it myself.
Yeah, it's usually pretty easy to do to get that Andrews Lamar stack. So yeah, no, the Ravens, I think we kind of finished them up. I'm excited about them in fantasy. They're easy stackable pieces. The receivers go late enough where you can grab Lamar and 2 of those receivers, and maybe even the tight end too, and Andrews if you want to do that. You can grab. I like grabbing Lamar and Dobbins and having a stranglehold on all those rushing touchdowns. So that's something fun that I like to do too. But so yeah, moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals. And before we do that, don't forget put
some receivers now.
That's right, some receivers. Put me in, coach, and draft some receivers tonight in the Superflex Bowl. Have a shot to win a free spot in the Superflex Bowl tonight. $50 entry fee for free. Put me in, coach, in the chat. On the Bengals, quarterback Joe Burrow. Shawn, you have him projected for 5,250 yards and 41 total touchdowns. Do you have him in your personal tier with Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts, or is he still a notch below for you?
He's below Hurts and Allen due to their edge in running the ball. I think that they have good receivers, and their production has obviously been high. I think he is getting closer to last year. I think Burrow ran the ball. What did he have last year? He ran the ball. He had like 275 rushes, 257 yards, and 5 touchdowns. And Mahomes was 61, 358, and 4. So he's getting closer, and Mahomes probably ran more than he had. He really had to carry the team and made some big plays last year. So I think Burrow's key for him passing Mahomes, because I kind of think I like Higgins and Chase better than Kelce and whoever their other wide receiver 2 is. But Mahomes does a really good job spreading the ball out, getting more out of less receivers. But for Burrow to really kind of step in front of him, he needs more time to throw. He needs to be able to get the ball downfield, make big plays like 2 years ago with Chase, and I think that will happen. I think they signed the left tackle from Kansas City, so hopefully that helps them, and their offensive line is better this year. If I'll probably lose in that, but I mean I would probably take Burrow again over Mahomes, and I'm probably against the grain on that because I'm probably a bigger fan on Chase than most. Higgins obviously has to prove that he can stay on the field and kind of push that, not have those kind of clunker games where, he had, what do you have, one game last year? He was in for 1 snap and left.
Yes.
And he came out another one. So, but, I like Burrow a lot, liked him since he came in the league, and I've kind of been on him. And you guys know that I rated Chase higher than most when he first came in. But last year he didn't, kind of obviously got hurt for a few games and he didn't reach where I thought, but.
Yeah, no, definitely. Great call on Chase. Rookie year had him highest in the industry on Jamar Chase. So we all know how that went. You must have known he could catch footballs. Everyone else kind of forgot that. And so kudos to you. Yeah, Orlando Brown, left tackle, added in the offseason, should definitely help with the pass pass protection there. Jody, anything extra to add on Burrow, or are you kind of have him right there in your wide receiver 5-ish range? Or sorry, QB5.
I've got him behind Justin Herbert. I just happen to like Herbert more. Most people are going to take Joe Burrow. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. I'd be ecstatic to come out of any draft with him. And just to add, if you're an FFWC fan, the Bengals play the fourth easiest playoff schedule from weeks 14 through 17. They get the Colts, Steelers, Vikings, and then the week 17, that championship game will be a rematch against the Chiefs. That'll be fun to watch.
Yes. I can't wait for that game already. It's like six months away. So yeah, I love it. So onto the running backs, you got Joe Mixon, you got Brown there. What are your thoughts on Mixon, Shawn? I see your projections here. Do you have any concern about any type of suspension? Any concern about, he was not efficient last year whatsoever. He had one really great game that carried his season. Talk about Mixon for us.
That great game that he had helped me and somebody else win $250,000 in the daily game. So
whoa, there you go.
It was a pretty
sweet.
That was a pretty impressive day. I mean, I actually that day Chase was out. I thought Higgins and Mixon, one of them was going to have a big game, and I played both. And Mixon gets 55 points, and Higgins gets 14, but the two of them averaged over 30, so it was part of the puzzle.
Wow.
But,
excellent.
Fields was the quarterback with his hookups. But anyways, I think that, when you look at this, Cincinnati, they're going to probably have a pretty good offense. You're taking a running back in a high-scoring offense. He's going to get chances. They had a really mid-season. There was a few games that both of their running backs were pretty productive, Mixon and Pirine, and just they scored a lot more points catching the ball in close than you would have thought. So I think that it's like I said, it's more of a bet on the Cincinnati offense than what he looks like.
Yeah.
And he kind of has a job. I do think that the backup, the Brown guy, is interesting as a cover, and he will get more touches. But Mixon will do a little bit of everything, score touchdowns, and probably be frustrating at times. But in the end, he'll be okay.
Yeah, I think it'll be frustrating more than we like. Jody, what do you think?
Provided that Joe Mixon's on their roster here, which I do expect now to play out. He's one of the best values in fantasy drafts right now. You're talking about RB13 last year. He had a career high 75 targets and 60 catches last year, and that was with Samaje Perine there for almost every week. So now you're removing that from the situation. Chase Brown, he might come in and be involved. I actually like him, but I look at Joe Mixon as an extreme value right now. Now, granted, there's some things to be concerned about. He was only RB21 in points per game. The touchdown production dropped from 16 2 years ago down to 9 last year. So that wasn't necessarily helping his total too much. But like I said, in this offense, like I said, you're getting him at a really, really good value right now, provided that we get through the next few weeks here and he's still on that roster.
Yeah, and if they don't add anyone, you're right. You got the Fournettes and the Zeke Elliott's of the world out there, just kind of waiting to ruin a backfield and ruin kind of these. They call it the running back dead zone for a reason. He's going in the fourth round. I get it. I totally get it. I want to love this pick as RB16. I feel like that's his floor. If he plays, like that's his absolute floor for sure. If he plays most of the season, but I feel like he had a ton of carries last year. I think this could, I'd rather be a year early out on Mixon than draft a running back in the 4th round that's going to kill me. They call it the running back dead zone for a reason. But then you look around the players going around him, like unless you're willing to take a quarterback, Allen and Hurts go around there. The receivers have a ton of question marks too. Godwin, Christian Kirk, Pittman, Mike Williams. So I could see going Joe Mixon in kind of the 4th round, but I just don't like the guy. And I don't think he's, I think he's kind of on the decline, but the numbers are, you guys are math projections, like who else is going to get the touches, and it's the Bengals offense. So I totally get it for sure. So yeah, moving on to these Bengals receivers. I know you want to talk receivers. Shawn, you were highest in the industry on Jamar Chase as a rookie. Where would you take him overall? I mean, are you willing to take, we're talking about receivers are going high here. Justin Jefferson, number 1 overall. Usually Chase is 2nd or 3rd. Are you willing to take the leap and take Chase number 1 overall?
the gambler in me would do that. I did that a few times last year and got burnt. But you know what Chase did last year? He kind of had showed a little more in the short catches to pad his stats. He can get to 6 to 8 catches a game. More closer to the line of scrimmage, shorter passes. 2 years ago, he had all the big plays, gained was it 18 yards a catch or some big number, and helped him out. And he has the potential to be an elite scoring wide receiver. So I think if you're asking me between Jefferson and Chase, it comes down to me. You like Cousins? You like Burrow?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think Burrow has a higher ceiling in that game. And if their offensive line does give him that longer window to make bigger plays, Chase is really going to explode. I think Jefferson's elite. He's going to have a tremendous season. Obviously, he gets drafted as though he's going to be the best in the game. But Chase is just as good as him. And, there's a lot, I think Cincinnati will be pretty special passing the ball. And I'm, very interested in him. And I hope I get a early pick so I can have a piece of it, especially when you're, saying the schedule is really favorable. Might help mix into, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. That's why we love auction leagues, right? Because then we don't got to hope for an early pick. You just go ahead and get your guy. Jody, Jamar Chase, you got him? Is he your 1B? Is he your clear 2? Is he your 3? What do you think?
He's in a clear tier with Justin Jefferson, and I've seen some people actually select him ahead of Jefferson. I get it, and Shawn just said on a great point. At that point, if they're really close to you, then you're betting on quarterbacks, and of course, at that point, I think everyone except maybe in the state of Minnesota is going to take Joe Burrow easily over Kirk Cousins. Even with it being somewhat of a downish year for Jamar Chase, we still saw him put up wide receiver 4 numbers in fantasy points per game. He's obviously an elite talent. You could certainly argue, him for the conversation to be taken at number 1 or number 2 overall. I'm still leaning towards running backs just because of the lack of depth overall at that position. But, you can't go wrong with any,
right.
You can't go wrong with any draft that you exit Jamar Chase. And again, if you could somehow end up pairing him with Joe Burrow, I mean, it almost feels like, when you do that in the draft, you're like, all right, I already clinched playoff spots. On how else can I improve my chances of being the champion?
Yeah, no, I totally get it. We're not at the NFC West yet, but I'm a big Cooper. I want to hear your guys' Cooper Kupp takes when we get closer, because Cooper Kupp was even better last year than he was the year before, when he was like the best receiver in the history of fantasy football. So, but yeah, I love picking up at the top because you can do whatever you want. You can go Jefferson, you can go Chase, you can go Kupp, you can take that CMC if you want to get that running back. You can go with the tight end Kelsey and lock that position up too. So I love picking at the top half there. T Higgins, some people have seen a little bit down on T Higgins this year. He just hasn't had that monster season yet, and usually by now he would have had that type of season if it was in him. You guys mentioned earlier he's had some really, dud performances, like those games where he's active and plays one play and comes out. He's done that a couple times in his career where he just disappears. These injuries that happen. Shawn, are you kind of with consensus here, mid-third round on a guy like T Higgins, or do you see room for more?
Yeah, I mean, I like Higgins a lot. I just, he's got even if he just pushes to, 80, 1,200, and I don't have him projected quite that high, and he has size and he can score touchdowns. It's just, their wide receiver 3 is decent, and they get a couple of tight ends. So he definitely could reach a higher ceiling. He just needs to stay on the field for all 17 games and play well and get a lot of snaps, and he has that kind of potential. And I think when Burrow came into the year, I think he was the rookie season, I think throwing the ball like 40 times a game. And the next year, their offensive line a little more conservative. They threw like 34 something. I got him projected, 632 passes, 650 passes. Sorry, Burrow 630. So there's a lot of chances there, and there's definitely more targets that could be had by Higgins and possibly Chase. So he could have a higher ceiling, especially if the Cincinnati defense could regress a little bit and they have to score. It would be kind of fun, But I'm interested in Higgins, and I think it's pretty in the full-time football event. Can you get Chase, Higgins, and Burrow pretty easily in draft?
Absolutely. Yeah, you get the hardest player to get is Chase. Like, you got to have a pick at the top there. But Higgins is ADP in the full-time mid stakes right now. He's going He's going to 2.9. So if you can get Chase at the 1-2, and then Higgins just has to fall 2 spots to you, and then obviously you can get Burrow in the seventh round. So yeah, I mean, it's that's a pretty fun stack to do. Yeah, I mean, listen, I understand it. I get it. Higgins is, you're right up here. The Bengals is exceptional. It talks about how Higgins' stats over his career. He's basically been a wide receiver 2 his entire career. So I think he's a safe pick. I think he's like a high floor pick guy there. But I don't think unless there's an injury to Chase, I don't think he has a shot at like that. Maybe top 6 or 7, maybe like a Chris Olave would is like the number 1 there, or a Garrett Wilson or something like that. And those guys are kind of going around the same ADP. What do you think? What do you think, Jody, of T. Higgins?
One of the easiest guys to project. His fantasy production last year was within 0.2 fantasy points of what he put up in 2021. He had 1 fewer target and the same number of receptions. So
yeah,
the role's been really consistent. Now, granted, he missed 3 games last year, but one thing to keep in mind about T. Higgins, and like I said, my numbers, he actually came out in the wide receiver 20s on the raw projection. So obviously I had to snap it up a little bit. One thing to keep in mind, 24 years old, he's in a contract year, and he's set to be the number 1 wide receiver on the open market last year. So you have to look at he's going to be making 10 times as much money on his next contract annually as he's making this year. So will that make him play safely to avoid getting hurt, or will that make him go balls to the wall trying to make that bank? We'll see.
Yeah. I kind of lean towards plus they're in a Super Bowl window too. So I kind of lean towards, hopefully, to him just going crazy. Tight end position here. I mean, we got some kind of fresh faces here. Shawn, talk about the tight end position. Is this a group that we should be targeting? Irv Smith, new in town, kind of a guy that kind of underachieved in Minnesota and then got kind of cast away once they added Hockenson. What do you think about Irv?
Yeah, he showed potential. He just kind of get nicked up. I guess with my projections for him and even whoever they have at the backup tight end, I got Devin Asasi, whatever,
Drew
is the backup tight end. But last year they threw 70% of the Cincinnati completions went to tight end. I lowered that to 16, which is minimal. I thought they upgraded the position a little bit by adding Smith. But he's a guy that has potential, and he's a guy that's fast, and it kind of makes sense. And they really need somebody to be the third option in the passing game. And Boyd's been pretty dependable, and I don't have him as rated as high as I probably should. But between them two, one of them's going to emerge as their third option in the passing game, and I think that he definitely has a chance, and he probably goes relatively cheap in drafts.
Yeah, for sure. Jody, are you in on any of the tight ends or Irv Smith? I think to me in best ball is like a late extra stacking piece. If you miss out, like if you go Chase and Burrow and then maybe, hey, I want one more piece, I grab Irv Smith towards the end.
He's just not someone that excites me. He's kind of undersized. He's always injured. I have them at between a 10 and 11% target share. So he comes in, it was like my tight end 23. I mean, you could do worse, obviously, than getting him, but he's not someone I'm going out of my way to target.
Yeah, no, I completely get it there. Awesome. Yeah, so I think it wraps up those guys. Cleveland Browns moving on here to a team that went from maybe a heavy run team to adding a new quarterback last season in Deshaun Watson, who did not look very good at all last year. What are your numbers saying here, Shawn? Any concerns with him after his poor showing?
Well, I mean, you got to have faith, I guess, because last year he did not look like who they paid for. But I think that Cleveland did a pretty good job adding Elijah Moore, and Cedric Tillman could be an interesting player this year. The tight ends catch a lot of balls. I don't think the running backs are that active. Last year, the wide receivers for Cleveland caught 52% of the completions, which probably weren't a lot, and I bumped it up to 58%. I know Cooper played well. So I think that Watson, he needs to revert back to how he played in Houston. He has a whole summer, and he can, to get in tune with his players. And I think there's a lot of potential there, and he's going to run the ball. And I just, I went in there before doing the team, and I thought, I kind of really wasn't going to like him, but I came out, I was like interested. You know what I mean? Like if he fell far enough and I got beat at quarterback and how my team structure went a little sideways, I'd willing to, take a stab at him. He definitely, what did he come out in my rankings he was 8th, and I have him
Yep.
ahead of Trevor Lawrence, which probably most people wouldn't, but probably, I guess they both run a little bit, but so interesting player, and he was one of the better players, especially throwing the ball deep when he was in Houston. He would rely on the deep ball, and obviously he had one of the best receivers when Hopkins was there. So,
Yeah, to me, he's like one of the last quarterbacks you can get with that intrigue. Like if everything clicks, like we've seen him be sensational before, and I think this might be like the best offense that he's been on. Like I don't know how much they're going to throw it, but like they have a good line: Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, David Njoku, Nick Chubb. Like I think he has a really good cast of characters around him. Where I think if he still has that rushing upside, he could finish as a top 5 fantasy quarterback if everything clicks right. If it's talent, he kind of take over again. Jody, what do you think?
Oh, he absolutely could. I think Shawn's projections having him in that QB 7 to 9 range is spot on. That's about where I have him. We saw some signs that he was coming out of what we could call the Deshaun Watson, the dark years from 21 and 22. The final 2 games of the season, he finally kind of started running a little bit. He averaged 37 rushing yards a game, and then naturally he posted QB 8 and QB 6 numbers in the final 2 games of the season. So he kind of ending, maybe it's recency bias, but he's kind of ending, on a positive thing. But let's keep in mind that Deshaun Watson, what a great player he was his first 4 years in Houston. And in terms of fantasy points per game, even as a rookie, he was QB1.
Yeah.
Points per game as a rookie. Then he was QB4, and QB7. So the first 4 years of his career, we're talking about an elite fantasy producer in that terms. And then, like you said, Adam, it's a pretty interesting offense. You have Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore has apparently been catching everything and flashing some chemistry. The kind of player that we all, us fantasy analysts, thought he was going to be when he was drafted by the Jets. Donovan Peoples-Jones was tremendous last year in that role. I think he's really being underlooked at this point. And then, they invested draft capital on Cedric Tillman. They've got a pretty good tight end and David Njoku. I really like, the supporting cast around the Browns. And, that's why, despite it's a pretty tough schedule, and I keep mentioning schedule because that's what I worked on. I published that this weekend, the fantasy strength of schedule for quarterbacks. Relatively tough stretch for the Browns with them being at QB 24, but overall, he gets back to himself. The same athlete that we saw that's focused on football. Very possible that he is around QB 5 and fantasy points per game at the end of the year.
Yeah, going right now is QB 9 in the 9th round of fantasy drafts. A good guy. Like if you miss kind of a bridge between like the kind of the higher end fantasy upside guys, and I mean Anthony Richardson's going behind him too, who has high end upside. But I think Deshaun Watson might be the key here. He could finish top 4 or 5 for sure. Yeah, moving on to the Cleveland running backs. Nick Chubb is the guy here. No more Kareem Hunt. Do you see, Shawn, did you see when you were doing your projections an increased receiving role for him? Or do you think someone like a Jerome Ford or a Felton can kind of take over some of that Kareem Hunt role? Because that's what kind of the difference is, right? Between like Nick Chubb doing what he always does, right? He's kind of like the T. Higgins of running backs, just the same thing every year. Or does he have that extra upside with some receiving work without Hunt there?
I think Watson in his career hasn't thrown a lot of balls to the running back position, maybe because he's a runner and stuff like that. I thought Chubb kind of has shown us, what he has as a receiver. He has more potential if they decide to give it to him. I just put, use Felton as the guy that would, be a kind of receiver and, maybe on those, 3rd and long and stuff like that they would use. So he could potentially, maybe get to 35 or something, maybe, what was Adrian Peterson at his best, was like a 40 catch guy. And then even Derrick Henry, most people viewed him as, even before last year, like he's not going to catch many passes, and he was more. So if he could get 40 passes, that would be pretty impressive. I didn't push him to that level. It's definitely possible. I just leaned on, not as many targets going to the running back based on Watson in the past and, what Chubb has done. But, he's pretty impressive running back when he's on the field for sure. Scores touchdowns. If he get a few more catches, he would definitely push up higher up the rankings.
Yeah. So you've got Chubb for around 300 carries for 1,495 yards and 13 rushing scores, 1 receiving score. That's a pretty monster season out of Nick Chubb. Jody, what do you think of those numbers? Are you around there?
I've got him at 1,400 rushing yards and 11 scores, but I'm a little more optimistic on his involvement as a receiver, simply because you're talking about they're not interested in bringing Kareem Hunt back. And at this point, it looks like Jerome Ford's going to maybe mix in as their RB2. We don't know how much Felton might be involved, like Shawn just said. But at this point, Jerome Ford has 0 NFL targets on his resume. He only had a 6.2% target share at Cincinnati, and only one of his 4 seasons did he even have double-digit catches with the Bearcats. So I feel like Chubb is capable of being a receiver. We've seen him actually be pretty productive in that role. It's just that in the former Cleveland offenses, they just chose to distribute the ball in other areas. Maybe now, as a change of things, and the fact that Chubb potentially could be on the field more than he was when they had a satellite back in Kareem Hunt, his involvement grows. So I love Nick Chubb. To me, his numbers keep coming in as RB4 or RB5, which seems high. It actually makes him a pretty nice value here at fantasy point, where his fantasy ADP is. But that said, he's not going to slip out of the second round hardly ever. So
no. Right now he's going as the RB7, late second round in the full-time fantasy. I'm okay whenever you put in like a player like Nick Chubb, the guy, you've heard probably all the time. Nick Chubb is the most talented runner in the NFL. I can't, I'm not a film guy like that, but I trust a lot of the smart people who say that he is the best pure running back in the league. Now maybe Bijan Robinson takes that over, but when you come in and the numbers are screaming Nick Chubb, and he's that talented, I like that. I'm like, okay, great.
Yeah,
So he's talented and the numbers are coming in. So I was never a Nick Chubb guy because of Kareem Hunt. Now, he's still not that old. I really like Nick Chubb in the mid-second to go along with if you go Cooper, Kupp, Chubb, or even if you want to tap running back and go Bijan and Chubb, if you can pull that off, that's a really nice start. It's hard in the FFWC because you got to start 3 receivers, but man, those guys are really, really good. Yeah. And moving on to these receivers here. I mean, Amari Cooper had a great year last year. So I think, Shawn, you've got him coming back to have another good year, 81 catches, over 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns. So I think you've kind of cemented him there. Are you comfortable with him at the 3-4 turn? Because he's the guy that I'm always I've never been a huge Amari Cooper guy, but I feel like he always produces and he's always there. At the 3-4 turn of these drafts, I'm like, man, do I pull the trigger on Amari Cooper as my number 2 receiver? What's your thoughts on Cooper?
I think the problem for my point of view on Cooper is that he's been a pretty good player in his career. He gets a better quarterback, but when you've got to the biggest moments in the season, in the championship weeks, he doesn't seem ever to emerge, and doesn't mean that won't happen this year. But he kind of lets you down. He'll have some great games, really awesome games, especially in Dallas, and then just nothing after that. I think a couple of years ago when him and CeeDee Lamb played on Thursday night, they had really good games and they got pushed up, and people took him in those drafts that were after the first game.
Yeah.
And he really didn't do anything. I think it was 2 years ago, right?
2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. So I think overall, I think he's a really good player. I think that we saw that Hopkins get, really clicked with Watson, and Cooper has the potential to run good routes, catch the ball. And to be honest with you, for him to do what he did last year, considering the quarterback play in Cleveland, that's pretty impressive to me. But will he be there in the big moments? And I think Watson gives him a chance, and I think that he could definitely push higher. He's a talented guy. He just gets a little nicked up sometimes, but overall, I like him. It just you got to get to the dance sometimes, but you can't win it without those big games late in the year.
Right.
Where's that Brandon Marshall 8 for 110 and the 2 touchdowns in
That's right.
16, right? Or 17, something like that.
Make legend. Yeah, that's right. We're looking for fantasy football legends, and we want these guys, these Zay Jones performances in the fantasy playoffs. That's what we're looking for, like he did last year. Jody, are you comfortable taking Amari Cooper as wide receiver 17-ish?
I mean, he's fine, but to me, his upside is capped. I mean, you just look at his career numbers. This guy, Amari Cooper, as busy and as evolved as he is, and you like the consistency. I mean, he always is going to surpass triple-digit targets, but he's never even hit 1,200 yards. He's never hit double-digit touchdowns. He's the guy that he's going to, there's going to be some up weeks and some down weeks, but overall, he's going to get you 14 fantasy points per game, and he's going to get you 75 catches and 1,100 yards and 6 to 8 touchdowns. It's fine. I would prefer for other players in that range to have a little bit more upside, but I've got no issues with it. I've landed Amari Cooper on plenty of my rosters. It just depends on the makeup of how your draft's going. If you feel like, okay, I want RB heavy, I need safe guys, I can't take any chances, then he's the perfect guy for you. I'm more interested in how the satellite receivers for the Browns play out. Like we're hearing all these positive things of Elijah Moore, like he's been the most heavily targeted player in OTAs according to the Athletic, and he's been lining up all over the fields. And can the Browns of all teams be the one that figures out what the Jets did wrong with Moore? Because I mean, as a dynasty person, I sure would love to see it. And like I said, right at the top here, I hit on Donovan Peoples-Jones. I feel like people are just assuming maybe that Elijah Moore is going to take all of his targets away. I don't necessarily think so. So to me, that makes Peoples-Jones a really, really good value late in drafts.
Yeah, Elijah Moore, he was so good his rookie year with the Jets. And people, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the video where AJ Brown is after Elijah Moore gets drafted, AJ Brown is crying, telling Elijah Moore that the world doesn't know that he's better than AJ Brown and DK Metcalf, who all played in the same college team at Ole Miss. Elijah Moore is an absolute stud. What happened is the Jets are an incompetent organization, and Zach Wilson is a mess of a quarterback. I was hoping that they would somehow keep Elijah Moore and bring in Aaron Rodgers, because that would have been electric there. I love the thought of Elijah Moore. I love the upside there. I think he's a really, really good player who had a really, really good rookie year. You don't have rookie years like Elijah Moore did with quarterbacks like Zach Wilson unless you're really, really good. So I think it was just he just called out his quarterback last year and he lost on that, like receivers normally do. So, Shawn, what are your thoughts on Elijah Moore?
So you're saying he's going to be a better player than Will Fuller in this offense?
He could be. I'm telling you, he could be. He's that good, right? Who is Will Fuller? It's a Jeopardy question.
The wide receiver 2 in Houston. But yeah, I mean, Moore's a talented. I just I would take a conservative approach. 55, 676, 4.5 touchdowns. He has the potential. I mean, we saw that in the second half of 2 years ago. And last year, he didn't get any chances. They didn't look his way and this thing. But Watson's going to get it to his best players, and Moore is definitely has the inside track as the wide receiver 2. If Watson could ever throw the ball 600 times, I mean, Moore is a guy that could see 15, 20 more catches right there. Works the short area of the field. He has enough speed to beat a defense. He actually kind of profiles as a better version of Will Fuller overall. Fuller used to run those crossing routes and get those easy scores inside the 20-yard line, and then he could beat a defense deep. So Moore is intriguing upside, and if the camp reports have, like you said, are already positive, it's kind of a reason to keep him on your radar for sure.
Yeah, and I love all those points that you guys made. He's going right now as wide receiver 43, which I think is great. It's not insane value, but again, it's a wide receiver 4. I think you can do worse there. He's a 7th round ADP. 7th round can kind of seem a little steep, 7th round pick on Moore. But depending, you got to start at 3 receivers, and the receivers are flying off the board. For example, Elijah Moore goes as wide receiver 43 in the same round that David Montgomery goes as running back 27. So it's you can't really look at the round there. You got to kind of look at the wide receiver tiers. And so I like him as the wide receiver 43 for sure. Anything else on Donovan Peoples-Jones or Cedric Tillman there, Shawn? I'm more of a Cedric Tillman guy. I think they drafted him for a reason. I think he was really good at Tennessee, had some injuries there, but he looks like he's got some skills.
I actually had Tillman a little ahead of Peoples-Jones. Peoples-Jones did play really well and made some big plays, and he was even him last year. He played better than expected considering the quarterback play. But I thought Tillman was a little more physical, might have a better connection. Rated them closely, kind of want to follow it, but Peoples-Jones has the experience and the inside track. But I think both of them will get on the field, and if they both develop and play well, I mean that gives Watson 4 receivers, and I don't think he's had 4 receivers and a tight end in his career when he was in Houston. So it's really his kind of a best receiving core potentially this year. All he needs is, what do I have, 558 passes. I mean, if he gets up with the big boys and throws a ton of balls and he runs it a little bit, he could have a pretty impressive season. So Tillman a little ahead of Donovan Jones for me.
Tight end David Njoku, you have for 65 catches, 733 yards, and 6 touchdowns. This is kind of one of my favorite, like, wait on a tight end kind of picks. Like, this is my early tight end. If I wait for a tight end, I like to get Njoku kind of in that range. Are you higher on Njoku than most? You see some upside there. Right now he's going as tight end 9 in round 10.
Jody, you or me? Is that me?
Sorry. Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Shawn.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he really, after, kind of not doing something for a couple of years, he kind of came on last year, played pretty well. I think he's going to get, last year they used a lot of 2 tight ends and they kind of split it up a little bit, but I think he's, kind of getting to a situation where he's going to push higher, gets a better quarterback, and the quarterback will probably look for him as one of the better options in close. And Amari Cooper, as you mentioned, hasn't scored a lot of touchdowns. Like inside the goal line, he'll score some, but he's not really like a Hopkins where he commands the ball in close. Elijah Moore, kind of a smaller, quick guy that will get some, stuff like that. But I think the tight end will be active, and I think he did in Houston have some lesser name tight ends that he, got the ball to and did use them at the goal line. So I think Njoku will fit pretty well in this offense.
Jody, you a Njoku fan this season?
Yeah, he's okay. He's in that tier where I generally am not targeting too many tight ends in this tier, but he does come in as my tight end 10. My numbers are eerily similar to Shawn's. I have him at 64 catches, 698 yards, really close to 5 touchdowns. That's kind of production you can be happy with. But like I said, I generally am, if I don't take one of the good tight ends, which like I hit on the top of the show, I rarely do, I'm generally, dumpster diving towards the end, trying to find guys in that, say, QB 15 or tight end 15 to 20 range.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I'm the same way. Get the stud tight end or go dumpster.
I'm going to be last in tight end points in pretty much all my leagues.
There you go. So yeah, awesome. So moving on to the Steelers. Good, well done there with the Browns. Again, we've had so many. This is probably one of the best divisions when it comes to just fantasy implications, especially from quarterbacks. But before moving on to the Steelers, again, do not forget to put me in, coach, in the chat. Follow, like, subscribe, all that good stuff for us, so we can keep bringing you this this stuff that should be behind the paywall. And here we are talking about it. Put me in, coach. We'll get you a shot at a free $50 Superflex Bowl team tonight. And I know Jody's excited to talk about the Steelers tonight, but maybe not so much Kenny Pickett. But Kenny Pickett had a better second half than first half. I think over the last month of the season, he was a top 10 quarterback according to PFF. Can that momentum carry over, Shawn? Did you factor any of that into your projections?
I did. I wasn't too aggressive on him getting more touchdowns for sure. I think that, early in the quarterback's career, even when Aaron Rodgers first came in the league, it's, learning how to complete touchdown passes in the red zone for touchdowns. And I think that that's what he has to prove. He's got, 3 viable receivers that catch the ball. He has a pass catching running back. Will he get there? So he didn't have it last year. And, I only have the team passing for 22 touchdowns. So, between their 2 best receivers, I mean, there's a lot of talent there, but are either one of those receivers, when you're doing projections, going to score, double-digit touchdowns? It's just, Pickens I would think could make a few more big plays and maybe score a little bit more, but that's the whole, when you're kind of trying to put the puzzle together, all the pieces have to add up for touchdowns. And Freiermuth, is a good tight end. but I only have 5 touchdowns. He scored a little bit more. So where are these touchdowns for him to get to 28 or 30 going to come for? Is one of those receivers going to score 10? Running back's going to score 5? Is the tight end position going to get 8 or 9? And that falls on this quarterback being to execute in close and score touchdowns. And last year he did not throw a lot of touchdowns. Ran a little thing and did get a little bit better. He has talent for sure. I don't have him passing. I guess I have him playing 90% of the snaps, so he could get. Usually I do 96 to 97 for the best quarterbacks that have resume. So shortchange him a little bit, maybe one game, but I'm neutral on him. I probably won't fight for him.
Yeah, I think he probably didn't throw that many touchdowns last year because Dionte Johnson scored 0 touchdowns. I mean, some regression to the mean. We'll say Dionte should score 20 touchdowns this year to kind of get back to his average stats. And speaking of Dionte Johnson, we'll go right to the receivers here, and then we'll go back to running back. Jody, I know you're excited about Dionte Johnson, as am I. I have a ton of Dionte Johnson. Talk to us about him and why you're so excited about him.
Well, I just think he's one of the best values, that are out there at this point. You're just looking at sheer target volume. I mean, in the last 3 years, he's averaged 153 targets a year. And keep in mind, one of those years was last year with Kenny Pickett. He was 6th in targets in the league last year, and that was in that situation. It was 9th in routes run. Number 2 in unrealized air yards. That tells you that he's just got really, really unlucky, and the upside is really there. And like you said, Adam, 0 TDs last year, and he finished as, I think, like wide receiver 34, 33, depending on your scoring. But give him like a measly 3-4 touchdowns, and all of a sudden he jumps up to wide receiver 24. And that's just with a modest 4 touchdowns. He had 18 red zone targets last year. Didn't come down with any of them. That was 10th in the league.
That's impossible. Yeah, it's crazy.
FFWC ADP is wide receiver 36. You can get him down in the 7th and the 8th round. I absolutely love Dionte Johnson. I feel like he's one of the biggest values, and I've been able to get him in just about every draft I'm in. And when I'm really fortunate, I feel like if you can lock him up as your wide receiver 3, or even better, if you get him as a flex, like I said, with just 4 measly touchdowns, I'm expecting improvements out of the Steelers' overall offense. I mean, I have Pickett at QB 20, which, like Shawn hit on volume and, the upside's kind of capped. But I feel like Dionte is easily their wide receiver 1. I'm taking him, all day to lead their team in targets and to, resurrect that fantasy value that he missed out on last year.
Yeah, I think those unrealized air yards, number 2, is a great point there. People will say, oh, well, that just might mean he stinks, but that's not how it works. You don't get air yards unless you're good. They don't throw you the ball down the field unless you're good. And we've seen really good seasons out of Dionte Johnson. So really unlucky last year, working with a rookie quarterback as well. I think they'll have more chemistry this year. I love Dionte Johnson as well as my wide receiver 3 if I can get him. Shawn, hopefully you don't throw a wet towel over here, ice cold water on our Dionte Johnson love.
He would never do that.
I guess the only strike for him is, his career is, you're saying on your realize, receiving yards, I got him down for 10.4 yards per catch. I mean, his career, he's, kind of close to the line of scrimmage, probably when Roethlisberger's there, the offensive line get the ball out quick, stuff like that's part of it. And maybe Pickett will be able to extend him, use him more over the field. So, he's going to get, 90 to 100 catches. I got him at 88, 915. But I'd like, if he could gain a little more yards per catch, he's going to definitely, get over 1,000. I got him 5 touchdowns. I mean, he's, like you said, he is a value. Just needs to score a little bit more and make some more big plays. And, and what Jody said makes sense.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And kind of Pickens here is a guy that I love coming out of college. Super talented guy. Seems like kind of a head case, but again, very, very talented. You have him down for 66 catches, so 20 less catches, but more yards, receiving 965 and 6 touchdowns. Is it Pickens a guy that you've been high on? Is this just a guy that, like, hey, you can't get super excited about because he is playing with Kenny Pickett, Shawn?
I just like what I saw last year, and he made the plays, and I think there'll be a natural progression. More of a big play receiver, has pretty good hands. He's going to probably, get more shots, on deeper passes to score. I think so. I think overall, he could progress further. It's kind of close. I think what is he? He goes. I think one of the things he was only like 3 or 4 wide receivers behind Johnson, so they were pretty close, and the gap's a little bit wider unless Pickens can get a few more catches and score a little bit more. But I definitely think he's a very intriguing player this year, and he's probably undervalued as well, especially if Pittsburgh can score more passing touchdowns.
Yeah, Pickens is going. Dionte Johnson's on mine on the full-time fantasy championship. Dionte Johnson's actually wide receiver 30 on this list, and Pickens is wide receiver 37. So, but both going in the 5th round. So it's kind of a tier there, and they're sandwiching J.K. Dobbins as the only running back in that mix. But I think I personally like Dionte Johnson significantly better just because the target. I think he's going to get way more targets. I think Pickens has more yardage upside, more touchdown upside, but I think Dionte Johnson. I just don't think that Pickett's good enough to give 2 guys, wide receiver 2 seasons. And I think that if I had to pick one, I'm going to pick Dionte Johnson. What do you think, Jody?
Agree. It was 60 targets more that Johnson had than Pickens last year. I like Pickens. I think you'll see natural progression over what he did last year, which I want to say was 84, 85 targets. He'll get closer, I think, maybe to triple digits. Probably a better chance that, with his size and production, that he'll probably lead the receiving corps in touchdown receptions. But good point, Adam. I mean, like I said, Pickett, to me, best case scenario, he comes out at QB 20. You like the efficiency from the Pittsburgh offense in general last year after their week 9 bye, that team really utilized that week off to, fix some things. At that point, Najee Harris got over the Liz Frank injury, and he kind of went bonkers down the stretch, and Pickett had 5 TDs, which, I know that's not a lot, but down the stretch, the Steelers did go 6-2 in their final 8, and Pickett had 5 TD throws and only 1 interception. So, again, if he can carry over some of that momentum, you got a really well-coached team. I feel like, he can be, something, a decent super flex option.
Allen Robinson, quickly, is he dead? Did he die at 28 years old? Like, he just became bad at football in your prime years of 28 years old, or was, there's talk about them running them on some weird route concepts last year. Real quick, Shawn, is Robinson washed?
I have him in the wide receiver 3. I don't have a big opportunity there. The other 2 receivers going to command the ball, and the tight end I have is pretty active in Pittsburgh, but it didn't work in for the Rams, which was surprising, and maybe too complex of a playbook, or there was opportunity there. The only good thing for me is that I didn't, when he was getting drafted high last year, I didn't take him, but when he slid after that first game and he went to like the 6th or 7th round, I got stuck with him a couple times. So I did get burnt on a guy that I was kind of fading, and I would have avoided him. So he has to prove it on the field for me before being interested, and he would have obviously work as probably a potential handcuff for one of the other 2 receivers. So I mean, you can't dismiss him totally, but is there enough balls to go to the wide receiver 3 in this offense? I don't think so.
No.
Just kind of disappointing for him.
Jody, is Robinson washed physically?
Yeah, I'm done with him. I was way too high on him last year. I feel like there's just I don't see a path to fantasy relevancy behind Dionte Johnson, George Pickens. Pat Freiermuth is going to command a lot of targets. Even Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren themselves could be involved as receivers. I don't see a path to enough production for him. He's a fine, I guess, okay value because he's basically being overlooked by almost everyone. But I think there's a realistic possibility that Allen Robinson could be out of the league in a year or 2.
It's crazy. 28 years old, and he just falls off a cliff.
You see it happen from time to time. He could be the next one.
That's crazy. Pat Freiermuth, he's going as tight end 10 in the 10th round of FFWC drafts over at Full-Time Fantasy Championship. I like for Freiermuth this year. I think he's got some good upside. I mean, listen, he finished higher than tight end 10 last year. So What do you guys think, Shawn? How do you've got it projected for 71 catches, 800 yards? That's pretty sweet for a tight end, but only four touchdowns. Talk to me about Freiermuth.
I think Pickett, used him more than would expected, with other two receivers on the team last year, and he kind of moved the ball, and he could probably score a little more in close. I think he is a guy that he will look for, and probably have the Pittsburgh underrated in touchdowns anyways. But I think the tight end has potentially to score a few more. But I just like what he does, and he's active. He's not going to make a ton of big plays, but I think that he's going to get plenty of chances. And when they try to take away one of their other two receivers, he's going to be the second option probably in the passing game in some matchup. So, definitely interested in him as, where he goes, and I like his upside.
Jody, thoughts on Freiermuth?
My model, his numbers came out eerily similar to what his numbers were last year, except I have some positive touchdown regression for him. So he comes in to me as a pretty solid tight end 7.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm not too worried about Darnell Washington yet. Dynasty, sure. I think he's a good blocking tight end for now. But I wouldn't worry about Freiermuth yet when it comes to. I'm sorry, I wouldn't worry about Darnell Washington yet when it comes to Freiermuth. I'd like to see more out of him. Back to the running backs. Najee Harris is a guy that I've been high on as a running back to kind of target at the 3-4 turn. I think from your projections here, Jody, I don't think you're as high on him maybe as I am. You have him for 1,029 rushing yards, 8 rushing scores. But he does have 50 catches for 3 receiving touchdowns. You see a lot of receiving work there for him and for Jaylen Warren. Are you in or out on Najee Harris?
That was Jody. That was Shawn's numbers, right?
Yeah, Shawn. Yeah. Sorry. Yep.
All right. Me, I just think that Harris has kind of been a grinder, but is that a result of a poor offensive line in the last couple of years? I think they've done a little bit better job there. I only have him at 4.1 yards per rush. He's a big guy. He can make bigger plays, and he does catch the ball pretty well, and he can score touchdowns. He just needs that offense to be a little bit better. Warren showed more big playability last year, and he can catch the ball, and he will get in the way. I thought there was enough carries for him to get Warren to get about 120 and 30 catches, so I got pretty good opportunity there. But I still think Harris has a high ceiling. He just needs to make some longer plays. One of those years he probably had only 2 or 3, maybe last year 2 or 3 plays over 20 yards. It was pretty small. So
yeah,
he just needs to make some big plays.
Yeah, I think them improving the offensive line will be much better. They drafted a really good run blocking offensive lineman this year. So I really like what they did there. Jody, are you a Najee Harris guy? Are you okay with taking him? I think he's fine where he's going at the 3-4 turn. I think he's RB12. Last year I was off of him. He was going in the late first round, but if he has that same type of year, getting him in the late third round is a much different story.
Sure. Yeah. He falls into round 4. I feel like I'm stealing at that point. You're talking about a guy that was 5th in carries last year, 10th in opportunity share, number 4 in evaded tackles. And keep in mind, like I said earlier, he was dealing with a Liz Frank injury the first half of the season, and he got it right after that week 9 bye. In the first half of the season, he only had his best output was 74 yards. After the bye, he had 80 plus rushing yards in 6 out of their 9 games and scored 6 of his 7 rushing touchdowns down that stretch. So he got healthier. He got better. Like you said, they spent a couple of they have 2 linemen, at least 2 linemen they brought in from the draft. And the rookie tight end that you mentioned, he's going to come in. Yep. He's basically probably going to be utilized as a blocking tight end early on. So I like Najee Harris, especially, like I said, if he falls into the 4th round, and he's easily to handcuff with Jaylen Warren later on. I think that's actually a really, really solid strategy.
Yeah, if you tell me hey, listen, I can start. I'm on Ross St. Brown, Garrett Wilson in the first 2 picks, and then come back and get Najee and Jahmyr Gibbs. I love that start. I love getting Najee Harris even at the end of the 3rd round. But yeah, you brought up Jaylen Warren. Listen, people are like, oh, Jaylen, they don't they don't split carries. It's Najee's backfield. That's just how Tomlin is. Tomlin loves Najee. It's his style of back for sure. I mean, even in your numbers here, Shawn, you give Jaylen Warren 118 carries and it still leaves 250 for Najee to do his thing. I love Jaylen Warren as a handcuff back, whether you want to handcuff him with Najee or whether you want to take him as someone else's handcuff. And if Najee goes down, now you've got, a high-end RB2. Because Jaylen Warren might be better than that Najee Harris. We might have a Zeke Elliott, Tony Pollard situation on our hands from maybe 2 years ago. But what do you think about Jaylen Warren?
Warren just, he just looked like he was a good complementary player, and he can, make bigger plays, and going to be active in the passing game. I was kind of actually, when you were talking about it last year, the Pittsburgh running backs. You said I had 460 something carries. Their running backs had 426 rushes for 1,798 yards and 10 touchdowns. They averaged 4.2 yards per rush. And Warren obviously, pushed that number a little bit higher. So I think I'm a little bit higher on that. I think the offense is a little bit better, but I think I'm not that far off. Like you said about Harris, probably, they like to work one running back in their career, but, I was kind of conservative, giving Warren, a pretty good piece of the pie. Probably a tougher start in the fantasy market, but I think that he will have some value at times during the year.
Yeah. And also I think there's some room too, is what I'm saying is even if Warren gets that 118, Najee's still getting 250. Now you only have Najee for 4.1 yards per carry. If he can get that up to the 4.5, now it's an even, now he can kind of explode from there and again, that doesn't really necessarily mean he's a better running back. The line might be better, than that's what gets him to the 4.5 yards per carry. But I really like Najee. I really like Jaylen Warren as a handcuff back, or as part of, if you're going to go hero or zero RB, taking him as your kind of stable of 6 or 7 backs that can maybe pop for you. And if God forbid there's an injury to Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren to the moon for sure. But
so last year Harris he had 272 rushes and he had 41 catches. He had one play over 20 yards.
Yeah, which is bad for sure.
The year before he had 9. It's still not a big number, and he touched the ball 380 times. I mean, he needs to get that number higher. I mean, to push. So he's 3.9, 3.8. I have him at 4.1. I give him a little bit of progression in the offensive line. So,
I think there's some room for growth in the receiving too. I mean, 50 catches is fine. It's totally fine. But the year before, I know he had more, 70 or 80 or something in there, and
74 for 467.
Yeah, with a guy like Pickett, we talk about running quarterbacks. They don't really throw the ball down to their. Pickett's the opposite. Pickett's kind of doesn't have a big arm, isn't super mobile. So I think he's going to be looking to get the ball to his running backs, and it could be Najee Harris for sure. So. But yeah, that wraps up our Steelers and our AFC North. Again, don't forget to put me in, coach, in the chat. And I think on Discord, they will announce the winner tonight for that Superflex Bowl. I might even jump into that bad boy tonight if I can, get some work done. And I'll be excited to do that. I love Superflex, man. Superflex is the best. Do we know what we're doing next week, guys? What our division is yet? Or am I going to wait on the edge of my seat?
I believe it's top of the AFC South, the disaster division next week.
That's oh God. I think I'm on vacation next week.
so we're about 3 teams in that division.
That's right. That'll be a half-hour pod. That'll be perfect. That'll be awesome. So but yeah, Shawn and Jody, thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Chat, thanks for joining in here. Again, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, all that stuff. You can find me at Adam_Krautwurst on Twitter. You can find Jody at Jody Smith NFL. And Shawn is at Shawn_Childs. We'll be a couple of us will be at the Expo. A couple of us will be in Vegas. So please don't hesitate to say hello. But again, I'm Adam for the Full Time Fantasy Podcast, and we will see you guys next week.